According to the Canadian Organization for Rare Diseases, 1 in 12 people in our country are affected by rare disease, 2/3 of which are children. In March of last year, financial support was announced for a national strategy for drugs for rare diseases. Joining us on the show this morning to talk about the importance of that funding, plus the role artificial intelligence can play in the fight against rare diseases, is Dr. Harsha Rajasima. Good morning, Dr. Rajasima, and thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
Very good morning. Thanks for having me.
Hey, the pleasure is all ours. So to begin, I'd like to ask how Canada stacks up in the rare disease conversation against other nations, considering roughly 3 million people in our country suffer from a rare and debilitating disease.
Absolutely. United States has been the lead in the world for rare diseases with the 1983 Orphan Drug Act of US FDA, and that has led to the approval of 1,100 orphan drugs in the last 40 plus years now. And overall, there is 30 million Americans that are estimated to be suffering from one of 11,000 or so rare diseases. And worldwide, there is 400 million people. That's about the size of the number of people affected by diabetes.
That's incredible. Now, Doctor, one thing that stood out as staggering is that only 60% of treatments for rare disorders make it into Canada, and when approved, it's happening up to 6 years behind America or in European countries. Why is that?
It's primarily the regulatory barriers and the pricing and reimbursement barriers, and also lack of awareness in some instances. Maybe the patient advocacy groups are not as active in Canada for that specific rare indication. So it could be a long list of reasons why that might be the case. But many Canadians are probably even traveling to the United States to access these one-off treatments for orphan therapies as well.
Now, Dr. Rajasima, what will the $1.5 billion investment into rare disease drugs do for Canada?
Oh, it can mean a huge deal. It's a great start. Certainly not necessarily sufficient, but it's a wonderful start and gives a lot of hope to various patient advocacy groups working on these number of rare diseases. Depending on how that money is allocated, seems like 1.4 billion of that is being channeled through research institutions, so which is a fantastic thing. How much of that actually goes towards research and development versus affording therapies and paying for the approved treatments already in the market? That's something to look at.
Now, Doctor, I'm glad that you mentioned research because that leads perfectly into my next question. What role could AI play in rare disease research?
AI is already playing a huge role, but the problem with AI currently is it relies on historical data and for machine learning and training purposes. And a lot of the historic data is based on US and European data sets, which is not representative of the global population. And so it may be biased in that sense. And so the first step for AI is 90% of AI is actually data gathering, data cleansing, data processing, and organizing the data and making sure it's free of bias as much as possible. It can't be completely free of bias, but we need to see the data is quite representative. So when we train the AI and ML models, they are based on data sets from the global population or the representative population. And that's unfortunately not the case currently, as 80% of clinical trial participants historically over the last 50 plus years have been Caucasian male adults from affluent socioeconomic backgrounds. And so there is a significant push both by the industry and the FDA in issuing latest guidelines and requirements for making clinical research more diverse, representative of the general population. And so once that is fixed, there are other areas where AI can help, is really in bringing language translation, with the Chat GPT and Open AI type generative AI applications, conversion of any language to any other language, so we can engage people in Asia, in the Middle East, in Latin America, and so on. That's been a hindrance for taking clinical trials global.
Well, Dr. Rajasima, thank you so much for your time this morning. We greatly appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you for having me.